Hi everybody, welcome back to the Claremont Classic Garage. Today we're going to try and answer a question that has perplexed mankind for many years. There's many questions that have perplexed us. What is the meaning of life? Why are we here? Is there a higher power? Who shot JR? But there's one question that means a lot to a lot of people. And that question is 9N, 2N, 8N, or just an old gray Ferguson. All these little things before you were the brain children of two geniuses, Harry Ferguson and Henry Ford. Ferguson had developed his three-point hitch way of attaching implements that revolutionized farming because, number one, guy in the garbage truck likes our tractors. Number one, it was a simple, easy method to put implements on and off the back of the tractor. And number two, it finally, once and for all, eliminated the propensity of drawbar tractors to flip upside down when the plow hit a rock or something. Anyway, the very first one was the 9N that came out in 1939. It was followed by the 2N, which came out in 1942, and the 8N, which came out in 1948. On the end there is the famous Ferguson, the little gray Fergie that made its debut after the war, 1948. Ferguson had been in partnership with different people making tractors with his three-point linkage up until that point, but they were mostly very low production. It was when he got hooked up with Henry Ford that things really took off. Anyway, I'm going to try to explain to you the differences between some of these machines because I know a lot of people, they buy a little place in the country or something and they decide they want a little tractor and they're confused. Bang for the buck, these little guys are hard to beat. Back in the old days, they were really expensive. I mean, 25 years ago, a good running 8N would be $4,000 all day long. Now in 2021, you can get a pretty decent 8N for $1,500 and they'll do a lot of stuff for you. I'm not going to get involved in the evolution of these guys that came later. The Fordson Dexta, the Ford 1000 series. The Ford NAAs and 100 series were kind of in between, but they were just greatly improved versions of these. The Ford 1000 series were the first really modern tractors with live hydraulics, live PTOs. So they, like I said, equated well with Fordson Dextas and Super Dextas and Massey Ferguson 35s. They were all very closely related, and they were the epitome of a small tractor. They are absolutely awesome. I've had all three of those in my life and I love them all. But these little guys are mostly what I stick with. So let's start the tour, shall we? We'll start our tour with the 9N. These came out in 1939 and they were built till 1941. You won't find too many early 9Ns that still have a grill in them because the grill was cast aluminum and they always got smashed and fell out. The tractor, I believe it's 24 horsepower, and the original 9Ns came on tall, skinny 32-inch wheels, like that one over there. That's a 9x32 on a 32-inch wheel. Starting in 1940, which this one is, 10x28 tires became available to stop the propensity that these things had for sinking in muddy conditions. So Ford made the little wider tire available. That's how this one is equipped, and I'm pretty sure I would say that's how it has always been equipped. This tractor came from a golf course. So it was owned by the golf course since new. It was never left outside a day in its life, and it's survived pretty well. It's had a few little, modifications done to it, like the boat steering wheel that they welded on. Anyway, those are minor things. This tractor is still 6-volt, positive ground. That's how they were. It's very, very easy to change them to 12 volt. There's kits you can buy and do it literally in an afternoon. This also has the original, we call these smooth axles. They're very, very highly coveted by collectors because this flange and the axle shaft are all one forging, and they used to break. So they were mostly changed out on warranty to the riveted axles that you see on this one. So if you happen to come across an old 9N and you're just interested in using it for working around your property and it's got smooth axles in them, sell them to a collector. He'll probably give you his riveted axles and do all the work and give you some money on top of it for your trouble, and you'll maybe end up getting your tractor for free. That's how you make these things work. On the back here, which is common across all of these machines, we've got Harry Ferguson's 3-point hitch, and we've got a PTO. The PTO is a small 1 1/8 6-spline PTO. So to use these in the modern world, you have to buy an adapter. We'll touch on all of that when we get to the 2N. Other things on these old 9Ns, they started out with an all aluminum steering column and dash, and then over the years it morphed into a combination of, some of them are aluminum with cast iron on the top, some of them are all cast iron, and on the 2Ns they finally went to a cast iron with a tin or a plate steel dash. All silly little things you can look for. These 9Ns, they had a few little chrome bits, chrome, and this is supposed to be chrome too. There's a little bit of it left there. They did away with that on the 2N also. Other things, something also interesting. These early ones, they do not have a pressurized cooling system. The radiator cap is literally interchangeable with an oil filler cap off the valve cover on your old V8. They fixed that later. And this tank, the tank on the top of this rad is huge. It comes back to about here, and it does not have a fan shroud. That is correct. Anyway, enough with this thing. Let's move to the 2N. With the United States entry into World War II, all kinds of war measures were put in place, and there were shortages and yada, yada, yada. Ford released a new model of tractor, the 2N. Now, the 2N wasn't really all that different from the 9N, but they changed enough little things on it that they could get around wartime price controls. When the 2N came out, some of the very first ones were just like this one. But then once all the war measures came into play, the 2Ns actually appeared stripped down. They had no electrical system whatsoever. They didn't even have tires. They were on steel wheels, like an old English Fordson. Great big steel wheels on the back with cleats, steel wheels on the front. You could only start it with a crank, and they ran on a magneto. And then slowly, Ford convinced the government that agriculture was vital to the war effort, and they released him from those war measure restrictions. And the tractors slowly started to gain back all their stuff, till they eventually just became a 2N like this. There are minor differences, like the hood between this and that is interchangeable, but there are little differences up underneath it. One thing they did was, on that one you can see the bolts for the bottom of the dog legs are hidden. On this one, they're exposed. They changed little things like the front. This is held on, the steering arm is held on with a clevis bolt, and this is held on with a cinch bolt. Just little things like that. But the basic engine, the 3-speed transmission were the same. You get to the back, and it's the same. It's still got the same 3-point hitch and the same little PTO. So, on these old things, if you want to run a post hole digger or a finishing mower, chances are you won't find one with a small 1 1/8 PTO. There's the difference. That's a modern 1 3/8 PTO. So you just go down to TSC and you get one of them, and that goes on there with a pin. and you've just modernized it. You can also buy replacement PTO shafts for these tractors that already have the large spline on them. They're probably 150 bucks. Now, if you plan to use this thing with a bush hog, you need one of these. This is an overrunning clutch, they call it. Now this one goes from 1 3/8 to 1 3/8. So I'll see if I can just stick that on there. But you can get them. I also have one in there that goes from the small size to the large size. So what happens is if you're running a bush hog, it has so much inertia. It's the way the PTO is geared off the transmission on these particular tractors. The bush hog has so much inertia. When you get to the end of the field, even if you push in the clutch and apply the brakes, the bush hog will still drive the tractor, and you'll go right off the end of the row into the bush, and that's bad. So we put an overrunning clutch on. So it allows, see, it turns one way, not the other. It allows the tractor to turn the bush hog, but not the bush hog to turn the tractor. And that's very, very important. No brakes in the world will stop this thing with a bush hog driving it. Now, as far as the lift itself goes, these tractors are only equipped with what we call draft control. So, the quadrant lever here does not control how high up the lift goes. It controls how far down into the ground it goes. You can't, if you think you can use this with a blade or something and hold it up at a certain level, it won't work. It'll always be hunting. Now, there are some devices you can buy that attach onto here and overcome that. One is called the Fergy positioner. The other is called the Zane Fang, invented by a really smart guy named Zane Sherman. I think he's probably passed away now. He was in Alabama. I bought some stuff off him. He was a really, really smart guy. He was like the Smoky Eunuch of tractors. Anyway, what Ferguson's 3-point hitch does is this. If you've got a plow on here and you're going along plowing, the 3-point hitch allows the power to transfer into the back tires and plant them. If for chance you hit a rock in the ground or a tree stump or something that would flip an old drawbar tractor, because they'd hit an obstruction in the ground with the plow, and the back wheels would just keep going and the front of it would buck up and they'd go over. And a lot of farmers were killed that way. What Ferguson's 3-point hitch does is if you're going along with your plow and you hit a rock, the hitch pivots this way and it pushes on this spring, which releases the hydraulic pressure in the Ferguson system, effectively taking all the weight off the back wheels, so the wheels just spin. It's a fantastic system. Saved a lot of people. Anyway, that's about it for the 2N. Now we're going to move to the 8N. After the war, Ford designed the 8N. And this is the one that everybody wants. The 8N solved a lot of issues from the earlier tractors, yet it stayed the same size, it stayed the same weight, it did everything that those old things could do and more, except go slow in reverse. That's a whole nother story. So, when the 8N came along, even though it looks pretty much like these, it's not. Even though it looks like all the parts would interchange, a lot of them don't. Now, what we've got on the 8N, the engine went up to 27 or 28 horsepower. It went from a 3-speed transmission to a 4-speed transmission, and they revised the hydraulic system to now include this little lever on the side. So when it's up like this, you have what we call position control. So this lever now controls the actual height at which your implement will float. And when you put it down like that, whoops, it goes into draft control for plowing. Pretty neat. And that was standard fare on pretty much everything after that. Dextas, Massey 35s, 1000 series, they all had that feature. At the back of the 8N, it's pretty much the same as those other ones. Same small PTO, same Ferguson 3-point hitch, although they added bolt bosses underneath this so they could bolt on a bracket and add a swinging drawbar. This is a Dearborn swinging drawbar. These earlier ones, there's no provision underneath the axle housing to bolt on a drawbar. So what these guys had was what we call a V drawbar that it clamped onto these arms and bolted to your drawbar. So it came out like that, a V drawbar. Simple, but it didn't swing. Also on the 8N, they introduced the 3-position rocker for different implements and stuff. Oh, the other thing I have to mention on the 8N, they finally put decent brakes on them. These are just 10-inch Bendix brakes, very similar to what's on a car. These ones, the brakes are terrible. That's another reason why none of them have any grills in them, because none of them have any brakes. The grill is the brakes. That's another great thing on the 8N. The other thing they did on the 8N was they moved both brake pedals to the same side. Which on these guys, the brake pedals were always separate. One on that side, one on this side. And when you're trying to stop, you need 2 legs on this side. It's kind of interesting. There's ways around it. Companies made handles to go on this brake lever, so you could use your foot for the clutch, your hand for this brake pedal, and your foot for the other brake pedal. Just one of those idiosyncrasies. Now, throughout the entire production of these tractors, you were able to accessorize them. They were so popular. There were so many companies making little bits and pieces and doodads for them. There were the Sherman brothers, which were associated with Ford. They were the official Ford accessory provider. And they made all kinds of stuff like these. Very popular in the day. Sherman auxiliary transmissions that fit in between the back of the engine and the front of the actual end transmission. You could get a reverser, so you could leave this in one gear, and this simply made it go forward or backward. You could get an underdrive, you could get an overdrive, and you could get a combination, which was an underdrive and overdrive. They also had, I think, one called a creeper, which was a super underdrive, or maybe that is the underdrive. There's so many I get them confused. Anyway, this one, I don't even know what it is, because the cotter pin that holds the handle to the actual input shaft of it, or the shifter shaft of it inside, has come out, and it doesn't do anything. One of these days I'll split this thing open and see what the heck it is. There were also companies like Cyclone that made these Cyclone pre-cleaners for the air cleaner. There were other companies that made stuff like this, a hand-applied parking brake for the 8N. That's we call that a Monroe seat. It was made by Monroe, the people that make shock absorbers. Instead of your seat being on the big old leaf spring like it is on that one, it's got a coil spring and a shock. Kind of nice. There were tons of accessories for this, like this, the tall air intake. That's an accessory. The vertical exhaust, that's an accessory. The light kits on these were an accessory. They didn't come off the assembly line with lights, so that was something you bought at the dealer. This one here has a factory light kit on it, but there were all kinds of other options. Little companies that made light kits for Ford tractors, light kits for, random tractors. And there's, this one's got a Dowden foot throttle. Just all this neat little stuff you could get on these. Another thing you'll hear people talk about is front distributor or side distributor. So this one here, you can see what they mean by front distributor. It's in there. It's driven off the end of the camshaft. The ignition coil sits on top of it, and that's your distributor. 9 ends, 2 ends, and early 8 ends up to the middle part of 1950 had the front distributor. Then, in the middle of 1950 up, they came with the side distributor. So this is just like an automotive distributor. It makes a lot more sense when you're trying to tune it up or diagnose it. It's just much more like what you would find on a car. And these ones are the most desired 8 ends is the side distributor models. There's some other improvements on the side distributor, like they finally started putting inner grease seals on the bearings to stop the gear loop from getting on the brakes. That's a huge improvement. Even if you've got an early 8 end, if you can find the trumpets and axles from a late one, you'll never have trouble with the brakes again. They also improved the steering box in the mid 50 and up ones. They have this one with actual proper adjusters. So all in all, the 8N is a pretty nice machine. More accessories you could get for them is the bumper. It just this one's pretty decked out. This one has a Sherman combination transmission. You'll notice the difference in the shift handle. If you see this cast one like this, you know right away it's a combination transmission. If you see that one there, it's just a round rod with a knob on it, then you know it's an overdrive, an underdrive, a creeper, a reverser. It's one of the other ones. This one, like many of them, has been converted to 12 volt and has an alternator on it. Oh, another thing you could get for these. This is a very, very rare option. This is a Sherman Brothers Live PTO conversion kit. So this 8N actually has a live PTO. Not in the sense that we're used to with a 2-stage clutch. This one, I guess it does have a 2-stage clutch. They're just separated. So if you're going along and your mower or whatever you're running starts to bog down, you just pull that lever and it disconnects the drive to the back wheels but lets the PTO keep running until your implement clears, and then you carry on. These are very, very hard to find. It wasn't even in this tractor. It was in this one. This brings us to our last exhibit, the little gray Fergy. These things were made from, in one form or other, I kind of think from about 1946 until 1956. And there was all different versions of them. They were made in England, they were made in Detroit, they were made all over the place. This one is an English-built one. Not in Canada, that's mostly what we had, the English-built ones, the TEA. There was also the TE, Tractor Europe, the TED, the TEF, and the TO, which is the one that was made in Detroit, the TO20 Ferguson. It had a Continental engine. These have a British engine. I'll show you how to tell the difference if you happen to stumble across an old gray Ferguson. It's pretty simple. If you see the oil filter on a slant like this, it's a British built standard engine from Coventry, England, and you've got an English one. If the oil filter is straight up and down, it's a Continental, and you've got a TO20 from the States. The Ferguson, it's a little different again in that it, number one, always had a 4-speed. I can't speak for the ones made in Detroit. I've never had one, but the ones from England, they've got cast aluminum transmission, cast aluminum transmission cover and steering box, cast aluminum oil pan. They made a lot of use of aluminum because they had lots of it after the war. Something else you'll notice different between the two of them, the Ford, to get at the gas cap and the battery, you just open this door and they're in there. The hood's fixed. On the Ferguson, the hood flips, and you've got the same stuff: your gas tank, your battery. The Fergusons, they switched to 12 volt a lot earlier than everybody else did, and it was always an overhead valve engine as opposed to the flathead in the Ford. These are great machines. The only real downfall with these is that if you have an American one, the Z120 Continental engine that they use in them, they have a real bad habit of cracking inside and filling your oil pan with coolant. These engines are solid little engines. They're great. The only two problems they have is, number one, they've got wet sleeves in them, so that can cause trouble. And number two, because they're from England, they can get expensive to fix if you need a bunch of parts. On the back of the Ferguson, you'll find that it's very similar to the other ones. It's got the same 3-point hitch and the same little PTO. The only thing is that the Ferguson never had position control. It always had only draft control, like the 9N and the 2N. But there's a way around that. When I redid this one, I used a hydraulic pump and a lift cover from an 8N. So this one now has position control and draft control, just like an 8N. It went in easy. I think I had to cut a little webbing or something out of the top of the housing. But aside from that, it just bolted right in and works like it should. That's an easy modification you can do on anything. Even if you've got a 9N or a 2N and you stumble across a scrapped out 8N, get the lift cover in the pump, it goes right in. And then your 9N or 2N will have position control just like an 8N. So that basically covers some of the nuances and the differences in between these tractors as they evolved over the years, and the Ferguson versus the Fords. Which one is right for you? I don't know. It depends what you're going to do with it. If you think you're going to blow snow with these things, that's a dicey proposition, especially with these 8Ns, because in reverse they go the same speed as in third. So it becomes very difficult. If you're fortunate enough to find one of the old drive-ahead single-stage V snowblowers, it was actually designed for these things. So you can usually get away with those, so long as the snow's not too wet and heavy. The Sherman transmissions won't help you, because you get one like this one has, and you say, oh, well, I'll just put it in underdrive and I can blow snow. The problem is, whatever percentage it slows down the wheels by, it slows down the PTO by the same percentage. So you're kind of euchred there. But for using them for bush haulage, for finishing mowers, for post hole diggers, all that stuff, they're great. They're not ideal for rototilling either, because they go too fast in first gear. But aside from that, hey, if you want to use it just for scratching around your farm, putting in, a deer plot or something, they're great for that. I obviously couldn't decide which was the right one for me, so I've got, well, several examples of each. Probably the most we've got around here is 9Ns. There's probably 10 of them around here. I guess the best part of these old things is that they just make you smile. Looking at them, using them, riding them, just driving around the field. I don't care if I'm even doing anything with it. I just like to hop on one and drive around the field. I love them. I love them that much. They've been a big part of my life since we moved to the country. Anyway, I hope you learned a little bit of something about all these old tractors today. And I'm far from a expert on these things, but I've had enough of them over the years to know a few things. And I certainly haven't covered every single thing here. It would take hours and hours and hours to cover every little difference. But hey, if you hear people talking about 9N, 2N, 8N, Ferguson, and what even makes it more confusing is that these ones, there's supposed to be a little badge on here, Ford, and then underneath it says Ferguson System. People call these Ford Fergusons. That just muddies the waters even more. But this is what they're talking about when they say Ford Ferguson. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll come back again for some more old tractor hijinks. But until then, thanks for tuning in, and this is Kevin checking out from the Claremont Classic Garage. So long.